The air in Cedar Springs tasted of dust and despair as Katherine Andrews stood at her husband's grave, the earth still fresh beneath her feet. Spring of 1871 had brought nothing but sorrow to the young widow. At 24, Katherine had already lived a lifetime of joy and grief in the 5 years she'd been married to Thomas Andrews. The fever had taken him swift and merciless, leaving her alone with their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, and a struggling ranch that needed more attention than one woman could possibly give. "You're still young, Katherine," Mrs. Walton said, placing a hand on her shoulder as the last of the mourners dispersed. "But don't you go getting ideas about finding another husband. No man wants a widow with a child. Thomas was special that way, willing to take on anything." "Men like that don't come twice in a lifetime." Katherine nodded, her eyes dry. She had no more tears left to shed. The past week had emptied her completely. "I don't intend to remarry, Mrs. Walton. Emma and I will manage just fine on our own." But as the older woman walked away, Katherine felt the weight of truth in her words. Cedar Springs was a small town with few prospects even for young, unmarried women. For a widow with a child and a struggling ranch, the future looked bleak indeed. "Mama." Emma tugged at her black dress, her small face peering up with eyes so like her father's. "Are we going home now?" Katherine lifted her daughter, settling her on her hip despite the impropriety of such an action at a funeral. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." The ride back to the Andrews Ranch was silent except for the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves against the dirt road. Katherine's mind raced with thoughts of bills to be paid, cattle to be moved, fences to be mended, all tasks Thomas had handled. She had helped where she could, but running a ranch was man's work, everyone said. And now it would be her work, whether she was suited for it or not. The ranch house came into view, a modest 2-bedroom structure that Thomas had built with his own hands when they'd married. The barn needed a new roof, the corral fence was sagging in places, and the cattle were fewer than they should have been after a harsh winter, but it was home. Miss Katherine, Jeb, their elderly ranch hand, greeted them as he helped her down from the wagon. "I'm mighty sorry about Mr. Thomas. He was a good man." "Thank you, Jeb. I don't know what I'd do without you." Katherine set Emma down, watching as the child ran to pet the barn cat. "But I'm afraid I won't be able to pay your full wages for a while. Things are going to be tight." Jeb removed his hat, twisting it in his weathered hands. "Don't you worry about that, Miss Katherine. I've been with this ranch since before you came along. I ain't going nowhere." Katherine smiled gratefully, but as she looked around at the work that needed doing, her heart sank. Jeb was loyal and hardworking, but he was nearly 70 and couldn't manage the heavy labor anymore. She would need to hire help, but with what money? That night, after putting Emma to bed, Katherine sat at the kitchen table with the ranch ledger open before her. The figures stared back at her, unforgiving in their clarity. They had enough money to last maybe 3 months if she was careful. After that, she would have to sell some of the breeding stock, a decision that would further reduce their future income. A knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare this far out of town, especially after dark. Katherine grabbed Thomas's shotgun from above the fireplace before cautiously approaching the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Nathan Morgan, madam. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back." "I saw your light and hoped I might trouble you for some water." Katherine hesitated, the gun still firm in her hands. Strangers could mean trouble, especially for a woman alone with a child. But the man's voice sounded polite enough, and Christian charity demanded she offer help to a traveler in need. "Just a moment," she said, setting the gun within easy reach before opening the door just wide enough to see the visitor. The man on her porch stood tall, his hat respectfully removed to reveal dark hair with a slight wave to it. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and though he had the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the sun, his face was handsome in a rough-hewn way. He couldn't have been more than 30. "I'm sorry to disturb you, madam," he said, his eyes a startling blue against his tanned skin taking in her black dress. I see you're in mourning. I can move on if you prefer. No, Katherine found herself saying. It's a long walk to town. You're welcome to water your horse. There's a pump by the barn. Relief crossed his features. Much obliged, I won't be any trouble. As Nathan Morgan watered his limping horse, Katherine watched from the porch. There was something about the way he moved, confident but not arrogant, that reminded her of Thomas. He handled his horse with gentle competence, speaking soothingly to the animal as he examined the hoof. Your horse will need more than water, Mr. Morgan, Katherine called. We have a small forge in the barn. My husband used to do basic blacksmithing for the ranch. If you'd like to stay until morning, you're welcome to use it. Nathan looked up, surprise evident on his face. That's mighty generous, Mrs. Andrews, Katherine Andrews. Mrs. Andrews, I appreciate the offer, but I wouldn't want to impose on a lady alone. I'm not completely alone. My ranch hand Jeb lives in the bunkhouse and my daughter is asleep inside. Katherine wasn't sure why she was explaining herself to this stranger, or why she was inviting him to stay. Perhaps it was the loneliness of the past week, or maybe the practical knowledge that having a man on the property, even temporarily, made her feel safer. In that case, I'd be grateful to accept, and if there's any work that needs doing while I'm here, I'd be happy to lend a hand in exchange for your hospitality. Katherine considered the offer. Can you mend a roof? A smile creased the corners of his eyes. Yes, madam. I can mend most anything that's broken. The next morning, Emma discovered their visitor at breakfast and immediately peppered him with questions. To Katherine's surprise, Nathan answered each one with patience, never talking down to the child as many men did. Are you a real cowboy? Emma asked, her eyes wide with wonder. I reckon I am, Nathan replied, cutting into the flapjacks Katherine had prepared. I've worked cattle ranches from Texas to Montana. Papa was a rancher too, Emma said, her small face solemn, but he went to heaven last week. Nathan's eyes flicked to Katherine, genuine sympathy in their depths. I'm sorry to hear that, little miss. Your papa must have been a fine man to have such a nice family and ranch. He was the best, Emma declared, and then with the abrupt subject change that only children can manage. Do you know how to fix a porch swing? Ours is broken and Mama won't let me sit on it. Katherine felt a flush of embarrassment. Emma, Mr. Morgan is only staying to shoe his horse. He's not here to fix our swing. Actually, Nathan said, setting down his fork, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and anything else that needs attention. It's the least I can do for your hospitality. True to his word, after shoeing his horse with expert skill, Nathan spent the day repairing the broken porch swing, mending the corral fence, and even starting work on the barn roof. Katherine watched him from the kitchen window as she prepared dinner, impressed by his industriousness and skill. Jeb appeared at her side, a knowing look on his weathered face. That's a good man out there, Miss Katherine. He's just passing through, Jeb, Katherine replied, though she couldn't deny the flutter of something like interest she felt when watching Nathan work. Maybe so. But good men are rare in these parts. Might not hurt to see if he'd stay on a bit longer. We could use the help. That evening, as they sat on the newly repaired porch swing after Emma had gone to bed, Katherine found herself telling Nathan about their predicament, the struggling ranch, the dwindling funds, her fear of losing everything Thomas had worked for. I don't mean to burden you with our troubles, she said, embarrassed by her sudden openness. You've been more than kind already. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, gazing out at the darkening pastures. Mrs. Andrews, I've been riding from ranch to ranch for nearly 10 years now. Never stayed in one place too long, but I've learned enough to know a good piece of land when I see it. He turned to look at her, his expression earnest. Your ranch has potential, it just needs some work and proper management. Are you offering to help, Mr. Morgan? I'm offering to stay on if you'll have me, as your foreman. I can get this place running proper again. Katherine studied him, wary of trusting too quickly. And what would you want in return? Room, board, and a fair wage when the ranch can afford it, he said simply. I'm not looking to take advantage, Mrs. Andrews. I'm just looking for a place where my work matters. Something in his steady gaze told Katherine he was speaking the truth. Still, she hesitated. The townspeople will talk, a widow with a strange man living on her property. A smile quirked at the corner of his mouth. Let them talk. Way I see it, you need help more than you need their approval. 2 days later, Nathan Morgan officially became the foreman of the Andrews Ranch. Katherine had him move into the bunkhouse with Jeb, maintaining propriety while still keeping him close enough to help with the daily operation of the ranch. The change was immediate and remarkable. Nathan seemed to have endless energy, rising before dawn and working until dusk. He mended fences, repaired the barn roof, culled the weakest cattle to focus resources on the strongest, and even found time to teach Emma how to properly brush down a horse. Katherine found herself watching him more often than she cared to admit. There was something compelling about the way he approached each task with quiet confidence, never complaining, never seeking praise. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been gentle but sometimes indecisive. Nathan knew exactly what needed doing and simply did it. A month passed, then 2. Summer settled over the ranch, bringing long, hot days and the need to move cattle to better grazing land. Katherine insisted on helping with the roundup, despite Nathan's initial protest. "It's not that I don't think you can do it, Mrs. Andrews," he explained as they rode out one morning. "But it's rough work." "I need to learn, Mr. Morgan," she replied firmly. "This is my ranch. I won't be a helpless bystander while others do the work." He studied her for a moment, then nodded with something like respect in his eyes. "All right then. But you'll need to wear something more practical than that dress." The next day, Katherine appeared in an old pair of Thomas's trousers that she'd altered to fit her smaller frame. The shocked expression on Nathan's face was worth the impropriety. "Don't look so scandalized, Mr. Morgan," she said, swinging up onto her horse with newfound ease. "No one can see us out here but the cattle." He recovered quickly, a smile breaking across his face. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Andrews." Working alongside Nathan, Katherine learned more about ranching in those summer months than she had in 5 years of marriage. Thomas had always been protective, keeping her away from the harder aspects of ranch life. But Nathan treated her as a partner, teaching her how to rope a calf, how to recognize signs of illness in the herd, how to judge good grazing land from poor. By August, the ranch was showing signs of recovery. The cattle were healthier, the buildings repaired, and Katherine had even managed to set aside a small amount of money from the sale of some yearlings at the market. It was after one such trip to town that the trouble began. Katherine had noticed the whispers behind her back, the pointed looks from the women of Cedar Springs as she and Nathan conducted business together. But she hadn't expected Mrs. Walton to confront her directly on the boardwalk outside the general store. "Katherine Andrews, you ought to be ashamed," the older woman hissed, her eyes darting to where Nathan was loading supplies onto their wagon. "Carrying on with that drifter not 6 months after Thomas is in the ground." Katherine felt her face flush with anger. "Mr. Morgan is my foreman, Mrs. Walton. He works for me, nothing more." "That's not what folks are saying," Mrs. Walton sniffed. "A decent widow would have hired a married man or an old-timer, not some handsome stranger." "You're ruining your reputation and setting a poor example for that child of yours." "I don't care what folks are saying," Katherine replied, though her heart was pounding. "My ranch is surviving because of Mr. Morgan's help. That's all that matters to me." As they drove home, Katherine remained quiet, Mrs. Walton's words echoing in her mind. Was she being foolish? Had she allowed her loneliness to cloud her judgment in hiring Nathan? "Something happen in town?" Nathan asked, his eyes on the road ahead. Katherine sighed. "Just Mrs. Walton being Mrs. Walton. She thinks it's improper for me to have you working at the ranch. Apparently the whole town is talking." Nathan was silent for a long moment. "Do you want me to leave?" The question struck Katherine like a physical blow. The thought of Nathan leaving, of facing the ranch and the future alone again, made her realize just how much she had come to rely on him, not just for his work, but for his steady presence, his quiet strength. "No," she said finally. "I don't care what they say. You've done more for this ranch in 3 months than anyone else could have done in a year." He nodded, relief visible in the relaxing of his shoulders. "Good, because I'm not inclined to go anywhere." That evening, after Emma was asleep, Katherine found Nathan on the porch whittling a small wooden horse. The summer night was warm, fireflies blinking in the darkness beyond the yard. "Is that for Emma?" she asked, settling beside him on the swing. "Thought she might like it," he said, his hands continuing their careful work. "She's been asking for a pony, but I figured this might do for now," Katherine smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness toward her daughter. "She'll love it. You're very good with her. She's a good kid." "Smart, like her mother." The compliment warmed Katherine more than it should have. In the past months, she had tried to ignore the growing attraction she felt toward Nathan. It seemed disloyal to Thomas, improper for a widow still in mourning, and above all, dangerous to her heart. But sitting beside him in the quiet evening, watching his strong hands create something delicate and beautiful, she found it increasingly difficult to deny her feelings. "Nathan," she said, using his first name for the first time, "why did you really stay? You could find work on any ranch in the territory with better pay and less gossip." He set the carving aside, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "I stayed because I saw something worth staying for, a woman with more courage than most men I know, a ranch with good bones that needed caring hands. A place that could be home. And now, after all these months of hard work and town gossip, do you regret it? Not for a single moment." His voice was low, honest. "Katherine, I know it's not proper for me to say this, but I care for you, more than as your foreman, more than I should." Katherine's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to run inside to hide from the feelings his words stirred in her. But a stronger part, a part she had thought died with Thomas, urged her to be brave. "I care for you too," she whispered, "and that terrifies me." Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "We don't have to rush anything. I'm not going anywhere." The touch of his calloused hand against hers sent a current of warmth up her arm. For the first time since Thomas's death, Katherine felt a flicker of hope for something beyond mere survival. "The town will talk even more," she said, though she didn't withdraw her hand. "Let them talk," Nathan replied, echoing his words from months ago. "Some things are worth a little gossip." As summer turned to fall, Katherine and Nathan settled into a careful dance of growing closeness while maintaining proper boundaries. He continued to live in the bunkhouse, and they were never alone together except on the porch in the evenings after Emma was asleep. But in those quiet moments, they talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Katherine learned that Nathan had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the oldest of 5 children. He'd left home at 18 after his father died, working his way west from ranch to ranch, learning every aspect of cattle raising and land management. He'd never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots, never found anywhere that felt like home until he'd stumbled upon the Andrews Ranch with its broken-down fences and resilient widow. In turn, Katherine shared stories of her life before Cedar Springs, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her journey west with her parents when she was 16, her courtship with Thomas after her parents died of influenza. She told him of her fears about raising Emma alone, about losing the ranch, about never being enough for all the responsibilities she now carried. "You're more than enough, Katherine," Nathan told her one crisp October evening as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. "Don't ever doubt that." Emma, with a child's intuitive understanding, had taken to Nathan completely. She followed him around the ranch whenever Katherine would allow it, soaking up his patient explanations of ranch work like a sponge absorbs water. To Katherine's surprise and gratitude, Nathan never seemed to tire of Emma's questions or presence. He treated her with the same respect he showed adults, never dismissing her curiosity. "Mr. Nathan says I can help with the calving come spring," Emma announced at dinner one evening. "He says I have gentle hands, just right for helping baby cows." Katherine raised an eyebrow at Nathan across the table. They had taken to having dinner together in the main house, a practice that surely fueled town gossip but felt right for their small ranch family. Did he now? And did Mr. Nathan mention that calving happens at all hours, often in the freezing cold? Nathan grinned, unrepentant. "I might have left out a few details, but she does have a natural way with the animals." "Like her father," Katherine said softly, a familiar pang of grief touching her heart. "And her mother," Nathan added, his eyes holding hers. "I've seen you with that ornery mare no one else can handle." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Katherine frowned, setting down her fork. Visitors were rare, especially at dinner time. Nathan rose. "I'll get it." He returned moments later with Sheriff Dawson, whose grave expression immediately set Katherine on edge. "Evening, Mrs. Andrews. Sorry to interrupt your supper, but I've got some troubling news." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Nathan, then back to Katherine. "The Rollins gang was spotted about 15 miles south of here. They've been hitting isolated ranches, stealing livestock and whatever else they can carry." Katherine felt cold fear settle in her stomach. The Rollins gang was notorious in the Territory Three brothers and their cousins who had turned to robbery and violence after the war. They were known for their brutality, especially toward women alone. "We've been warned," she said, working to keep her voice steady for Emma's sake. "Thank you, Sheriff." "I'd stay and keep watch, but I'm gathering men to form a posse," Dawson said. "We aim to catch them before they hit another ranch." He hesitated, looking at Nathan. "Morgan, you any good with a gun?" "Good enough," Nathan replied, his expression hardening. "Could use a man like you in the posse." Before Nathan could respond, Katherine cut in. "Mr. Morgan is needed here, Sheriff. We can't spare him." Dawson frowned but nodded. "Your choice, madam, but keep your doors locked and that shotgun loaded. Rollins and his boys don't leave witnesses." After the sheriff left, Katherine sent Emma to her room to play, not wanting to discuss the threat in front of her daughter. "I should join the posse," Nathan said once Emma was out of earshot. "Help track them down before they get anywhere near here." "No." Katherine's response was immediate and firm. "I need you here, we need you here." "Katherine, if they come, then we'll face them together," she interrupted. "I won't have you riding off to confront those men. The sheriff has deputies and townsmen. Let them handle it." Nathan studied her face, seeming to read the fear she was trying to hide. "All right," he agreed finally, "but we're going to take precautions. Starting tonight, I'm sleeping in the house." Katherine's eyes widened. "Nathan, that's not proper." "Neither is leaving you and Emma unprotected when there's a gang of killers in the area." His expression softened. "I'll sleep on the floor in the front room. No one will ever know except us." That night, after checking every window and door, Nathan made a pallet for himself near the fireplace in the main room. Katherine brought him extra blankets, her heart racing at the impropriety of having him sleep under her roof, yet grateful for his protective presence. "Thank you," she said softly, standing awkwardly beside his makeshift bed. "For staying." Nathan looked up at her, the firelight casting warm shadows across his face. "I told you before, Katherine, I'm not going anywhere." For 3 nights they maintained this arrangement. During the day, they worked the ranch as usual, though Nathan kept his rifle close at hand and insisted Katherine do the same with her shotgun. At night, he slept in the front room while Katherine and Emma slept in their bedrooms down the hall. On the 4th night, a sudden storm blew in from the mountains, bringing howling winds and driving rain that rattled the windows and sent the cattle huddling together in the pastures. Katherine had just tucked Emma in when she heard a crash from outside. She hurried to the front room to find Nathan pulling on his coat. "The barn door broke loose," he explained. "I need to secure it before it tears off completely." "I'll come with you," Katherine said, reaching for her own coat. "No, stay with Emma, I'll be quick." Before she could argue, he was gone, disappearing into the storm with a lantern that cast a feeble glow against the darkness. Katherine stood at the window, watching anxiously as the light bobbed its way to the barn. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The wind wailed around the house, and rain pounded against the roof with a fury that matched Katherine's growing concern. Nathan should have been back by now. Just as she was considering going after him, the front door burst open. Nathan stumbled in, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. "Riders," he gasped, shutting and bolting the door behind him. 5 of them coming up the road. Katherine felt her blood turn to ice. "The Rollins gang, most likely. They're moving slow in this storm, but they'll be here within minutes." Nathan moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Get Emma, we need to hide." Katherine's mind raced. The house offered few hiding places, and trying to flee in the storm would be suicide. "The root cellar," she said suddenly. "Behind the kitchen. Thomas built it with a hidden entrance." She rushed to Emma's room, lifting her still sleeping daughter into her arms. The child stirred but didn't wake, accustomed to being carried to her mother's bed during storms. Nathan gathered their guns and as much ammunition as he could find while Katherine led the way to the kitchen. Behind the pantry shelves, a small door opened to reveal a steep staircase leading down into darkness. "Thomas built this when there was trouble with raiders during the war," Katherine explained in a whisper as they descended. "It's stocked with supplies and has an air shaft that's hard to spot from outside." The cellar was small but dry, with shelves of preserved food, jugs of water, and even a few blankets. Nathan closed the door behind them, sliding a heavy wooden bar into place. "It won't hold if they find it," he said grimly, checking his rifle. "But they won't find it," Katherine replied, settling Emma onto a makeshift pallet of blankets in the corner. "Not unless they tear up the entire kitchen floor." They sat in tense silence, listening to the muffled sounds of the storm above. Then, over the rain, came the unmistakable sounds of men entering the house, heavy boots on the wooden floors, furniture being moved, doors slamming open. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mama." "Why are we in the cellar?" Katherine pressed a finger to her lips. "SHH, sweetheart. We're playing a game. We need to be very quiet like mice." Emma's eyes widened at the adventure of it, but she nodded solemnly, understanding the seriousness in her mother's voice. Above them, the intruders grew louder, their voices now audible through the floorboards. "Place is empty," one man called. "But they ain't gone far. Beds are still warm." "Check the barn," another voice ordered. "Could be hiding with the livestock. In this storm, more likely they ran for town." "Fool woman probably took the kid and bolted when she saw us coming." "Leave something to remember us by, boys, then let's move on. Ain't worth waiting around for the law to show." The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood followed. Katherine closed her eyes, thinking of all the repairs they had made, all the work Nathan had put into making the ranch function again, being destroyed in minutes of senseless violence. Nathan moved closer to her, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. Emma crawled into Katherine's lap, burying her face against her mother's chest. For what seemed like hours, they huddled together in the dark as the men above ransacked the house. Finally, the noise began to recede, and they heard the sound of horses moving away from the house. "Are they gone?" Katherine whispered. Nathan put a finger to his lips, listening intently. "I don't trust it. Could be a trick to draw us out." He adjusted his position, wincing slightly. "You're hurt," Katherine realized, noticing for the first time the dark stain on his shirt sleeve. "It's nothing." Must have caught it on a nail in the barn, but when she pulled back his sleeve, the gash was deep and still bleeding freely. "This needs cleaning and stitching," she said firmly. "Later. First, we make sure they're truly gone." They waited another hour before Nathan cautiously lifted the bar and crept up the stairs. Katherine held her breath until he returned, his face grim but relieved. "They're gone, but they made a mess of things." The destruction was worse than Katherine had feared. Furniture was overturned, dishes smashed, and the pantry emptied. Her few precious belongings, a cameo necklace from her mother, Thomas's pocket watch, were gone. But the true devastation was outside. The barn door hung from one hinge and the corral fence was partially torn down. Worst of all, at least a dozen cattle were missing, including 2 of their best breeding cows. They didn't find the hiding place for the cash box, Nathan said, trying to offer some consolation as they surveyed the damage in the gray light of dawn. The storm had passed, leaving a muddy, sodden landscape in its wake, and the house structure is sound. We can repair this. Katherine stood in the middle of her ravaged home, Emma clinging to her skirts, and felt a surge of rage replace her fear. This was deliberate cruelty. They didn't need to destroy what they couldn't steal. Men like that enjoy breaking things, Nathan said quietly, makes them feel powerful. Well, I won't let them break me. Katherine straightened her shoulders. Or this ranch. Nathan's eyes shone with admiration. I never thought you would. They spent the day cleaning and salvaging what they could. Nathan's arm required stitches, which Katherine provided with steady hands despite her concern. By nightfall, the house was somewhat restored to order, though many items would need replacing. Sheriff Dawson arrived the following morning, his expression grave as he surveyed the damage. Rollins hit 2 other ranches before yours, he reported. We've got men tracking them, but they're headed into Apache territory, not sure we can follow. So they get away with it, Katherine said bitterly. Again, justice has long arms, Mrs. Andrews, the sheriff replied, though he didn't sound convinced. Main thing is you and the little one are safe. He cast a pointed look at Nathan. Lucky Morgan was here. There was something in his tone that made Katherine bristle. Yes, it was. Mr. Morgan risked his life to protect us. After the sheriff left, promising to send word if they recovered any of the stolen cattle, Katherine found Nathan on the porch, mending a chair that had been broken in the raid. The sheriff seemed to have some thoughts about your presence here, she said, leaning against the porch rail. Nathan's hands paused in their work. People will always talk, Katherine, more so now that I've spent 2 nights under your roof. Does that bother you? What bothers me, he said, setting the chair aside and standing to face her, is that you and Emma were put in danger and I nearly wasn't here to help if I joined that posse like Dawson wanted. But you didn't. You stayed and we're safe because of it. Katherine took a step toward him, emboldened by the intensity in his eyes. Nathan, these past months, you've become more than just my foreman, more than a friend. Katherine, he breathed her name like a prayer. I've tried to keep a proper distance, to respect your mourning, your position. But every day it gets harder to remember why I shouldn't tell you how I feel. Then tell me, she whispered. I love you, he said simply, the words hanging in the air between them. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood on this porch with a shotgun, brave and beautiful despite your grief. Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of release, as if a tight band around her heart had suddenly loosened. I love you too, she confessed, and I've been so afraid of it. Afraid of what? Of betraying Thomas, of what people would say, of losing you too. The tears spilled over now, tracing warm paths down her cheeks. Mrs. Walton told me at Thomas's funeral that no one would ever love me again. That men like Thomas don't come twice in a lifetime. Nathan stepped closer, his hand gently wiping away her tears. She was right about one thing: men like Thomas don't come twice. Every love is different. His voice was tender, understanding. Loving me doesn't diminish what you had with him. It just means your heart is big enough for both. And the town gossip, let them talk, he said for the 3rd time, a smile tugging at his lips. I'll prove them wrong about widows and second chances. This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, Katherine didn't hesitate. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss conveying all the restrained feeling of the past months. She lifted her hands to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her palms. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Katherine felt lighter than she had in years. Not just since Thomas's death, but perhaps even before, a lightness born of finding unexpected joy after accepting its absence. Mama, Emma's small voice came from the doorway. Why are you kissing Mr. Nathan? Katherine turned, her cheeks flushing, to find her daughter watching them with curious eyes. She beckoned Emma to join them on the porch. "Emma, sweetheart, Mr. Nathan and I care for each other very much," she explained, kneeling to her daughter's level. "The way that grown-ups do sometimes." Emma considered this, her head tilted to one side. "Like you and Papa," Katherine nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, like that. Would it be all right with you if Mr. Nathan became part of our family?" The child looked up at Nathan, her expression serious. "Would you still teach me about the horses and cows?" Nathan knelt beside Katherine, his eyes level with Emma's. "I would teach you everything I know, and I would love you and your mama with all my heart every day." Emma's face broke into a wide smile. "Then it's all right with me." In the weeks that followed, Katherine and Nathan's relationship blossomed in the open. The town gossip flared as expected, but Katherine found she cared less with each passing day. The ranch was recovering from the raid. The remaining cattle were healthy, and most importantly, her heart was healing in ways she hadn't thought possible. Nathan moved his few belongings into the main house, though he insisted on maintaining propriety by sleeping in the spare room until they could be properly married. The arrangement raised eyebrows in town, but after the Rollins gang's attack, even Mrs. Walton had to admit that having a man on the property was sensible. December brought cold weather and preparations for Christmas. Katherine found herself looking forward to the holiday for the first time since Thomas's death. She and Emma decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, while Nathan crafted a special gift for Emma in the barn during the evenings, a miniature rocking horse, intricately carved and painted. On Christmas Eve, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, vibrating with excitement for the morning, Katherine and Nathan sat before the fire, sharing a rare glass of whiskey. "I have something for you," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket. "I wanted to give it to you privately, before tomorrow's excitement." He pulled out a small velvet pouch and placed it in Katherine's palm. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's," Nathan explained, his voice soft with memory. "The only thing of value I've carried with me all these years." Katherine held the ring reverently, tears pricking at her eyes. "It's beautiful." "Katherine Andrews," Nathan said, taking her hand in his. "I know we've only known each other for 8 months. I know people will say it's too soon after Thomas. But I love you with every part of me, and I love Emma as if she were my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Katherine looked at this man who had appeared in their lives like an answer to an unspoken prayer, this man who had rebuilt their fences, their barn, and in many ways their hearts. "Yes," she whispered, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan Morgan." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. They were married on New Year's Day, 1872, in a small ceremony at the ranch. The weather cooperated with clear skies and unusually mild temperatures for January. Pastor Michaels from the Cedar Springs church officiated, and to Katherine's surprise, several townspeople attended despite the gossip that had surrounded their courtship. Emma served as flower girl, proudly scattering rose petals saved from the last summer blooms in front of her mother. Katherine wore a new dress of deep blue silk, not the traditional white, out of respect for her first marriage, but a color that matched Nathan's eyes and symbolized the new beginning they were creating together. After the ceremony, as guests enjoyed the wedding feast prepared by women from neighboring ranches, Katherine found herself cornered by Mrs. Walton. "Well," the older woman sniffed, eyeing Nathan across the room where he was laughing with some of the local ranchers. "I suppose I was wrong about you." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "Wrong, Mrs. Walton, about finding another husband, though I still say it's mighty quick after Thomas." Katherine might have been offended once, but now she merely smiled. "The heart knows its own time, Mrs. Walton, and mine recognized Nathan the moment he arrived. He seems a good man," Mrs. Walton conceded, "and he clearly adores that child of yours. He is a good man. Different from Thomas, but equally worthy of love. Katherine touched the pearl ring on her finger. And he's taught me that second chances can be just as blessed as first ones. That night, after the guests had departed and Emma was asleep, Katherine and Nathan stood on the porch of what was now truly their home. Snow had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting down in the moonlight, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white. "Mrs. Morgan," Nathan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, "are you happy?" Katherine leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Happier than I ever thought possible again. When I first saw you standing on this porch, holding that shotgun with tears in your eyes but steel in your spine, I knew you were something special," he murmured against her hair. "But I never dreamed you'd become my wife. And I never imagined that a stranger with a lame horse would become the second great love of my life." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for proving them wrong, all those who said a widow with a child could never find love again." "They didn't know what I knew from the start," Nathan said, cupping her face in his hands. "That you're worth crossing mountains for, worth fighting for, worth loving forever." As their lips met in the quiet snowfall of their wedding night, Katherine felt the last lingering shadow of grief lift from her heart. The past would always be a part of her Thomas, the early years of Emma's life, the struggles and joys they had shared. But the future stretched before her now, bright with promise and filled with the love of the man who had whispered, "I'll prove them wrong," and then done exactly that. Spring arrived early in 1872, bringing with it new life to the Andrews' now Morgan ranch. The cattle thrived under Nathan's careful management, and Katherine's skilled bookkeeping showed a modest profit for the first time in years. Emma, now 4, spent her days following her stepfather around the ranch, soaking up knowledge like the spring earth absorbed the rain. True to his promise, Nathan included Emma in the spring calving, teaching her to recognize when a cow was in labor and how to help if necessary. Katherine watched them together, her heart full at the sight of her daughter's small hand in Nathan's large one as they made their morning rounds. By summer, Katherine had news of her own to share. On a warm July evening, as they sat on the porch swing watching fireflies rise from the grass, she took Nathan's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said, her voice trembling with joy and a touch of apprehension. In winter around Christmas, Nathan's face transformed with wonder. "A baby," he repeated, his eyes filling with tears. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly anxious. "I know we hadn't discussed," he silenced her with a kiss, pulling back only to rest his forehead against hers. "I'm more than happy, Katherine. I'm blessed beyond measure." Emma was ecstatic at the news that she would be a big sister, immediately beginning plans for how she would help with the baby and what she would teach her little brother or sister about ranch life. The months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Nathan built a cradle from oak, carving delicate patterns of leaves and animals along its sides. Katherine sewed tiny garments in the evenings, sometimes using fabric from her own dresses that held memories of special moments in their life together. On December 20, 1872, almost exactly a year after Nathan had proposed, Katherine gave birth to a son. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with the town midwife attending and Nathan pacing anxiously outside until the first cry announced the baby's arrival. "He has your eyes," Katherine whispered when Nathan was finally allowed in to see his wife and son. "And your chin." Nathan took the tiny bundle with trembling hands, all written across his features as he gazed down at his son. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to see their child first. Katherine studied the baby's face, noting the blend of their features in his tiny countenance. "Thomas Nathan Morgan," she said softly, "to honor the past and celebrate the present." Nathan's eyes met hers, understanding and love shining in their blue depths. "It's perfect." Emma was allowed in next, her eyes wide with wonder as she peered at her baby brother. "He's so small," she whispered, "but Papa says he'll grow big and strong like me." Catherine's heart swelled at hearing Emma call Nathan Papa. It had happened naturally a few months after their wedding, without prompting or discussion. The first time Emma had used the word, Nathan had been so moved he'd had to leave the room to compose himself. As winter settled over the ranch, the Morgan family nestled into their home, adjusting to life with a newborn. Nathan took over many of Emma's lessons to allow Katherine time to rest and nurse the baby. He proved to be as natural a father to his son as he had been a stepfather to Emma, handling the infant with confident tenderness that belied his rough cowboy exterior. "You're a natural with him," Katherine observed one evening as Nathan walked the floor with a fussy Thomas, humming a low tune that seemed to soothe the baby. "Had lots of practice with my younger siblings," he replied, gently patting the baby's back, "though it's different when it's your own son." "Different how?" Nathan looked down at the now sleeping infant in his arms, his expression soft with love. "Everything means more. Everything feels eternal somehow. Like all the wandering I did was just to find my way here to you and Emma and this little one." As Thomas grew from newborn to infant, the ranch prospered under the combined efforts of Katherine and Nathan. They added a room to the house, hired 2 more hands to help with the expanding herd, and even purchased an adjoining piece of land when it came up for sale. By the time Thomas celebrated his first birthday, the Morgan Ranch was known throughout the territory as one of the most successful operations in the area. Nathan's innovative breeding practices and Katherine's shrewd business sense had transformed the struggling property into a thriving enterprise. "Not bad for a widow who was told she'd never find love again," Katherine mused as they stood together on the porch on New Year's Eve, 1873, watching the last sunset of the year paint the sky in brilliant orange and pink. "Not bad for a drifter who never thought he'd have a home," Nathan countered, pulling her close against the winter chill. Inside, Emma was teaching Thomas to stack wooden blocks, her patience with her brother revealing the kind young woman she was becoming. The sounds of children's laughter filtered through the window, a counterpoint to the distant lowing of cattle in the pastures. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" Katherine asked, leaning into her husband's warmth. "If your horse hadn't thrown that shoe." "I would have found you somehow," Nathan said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be, Katherine. Some loves are written in the stars long before we know they exist." She smiled up at him, this man who had ridden into her life when she needed him most, who had helped her rebuild not just her ranch but her belief in second chances. "I think you're right," she said, "but I'm glad your horse had the good sense to lose that shoe right when he did." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm in the gathering twilight. That old horse was smarter than he looked. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine Morgan, do you know what I thought the moment I saw you standing on this porch with that shotgun?" "What?" she asked, curious about this detail he'd never shared. "I thought, there's a woman worth staying for, and every day since has proven me right." As they stood together in the deepening dusk, watching the first stars appear in the winter sky, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of grief to the heights of joy, from solitary struggle to shared strength, they had built something beautiful together, a family, a home, a love that defied the predictions of those who saw only limitations where life held possibilities. Inside, Emma called for them to come see the tower she had built with Thomas. Hand in hand, Katherine and Nathan turned toward the warm light spilling from the windows of their home, ready to step into another year of the life they had created together, a life built on second chances, hard work, and a love that had indeed proven all the doubters wrong.